Erdogan finishes his tea, and somewhere between Crimea and the Caucasus, rail steel screams. That's the story you clicked for. But the real hook, the physics of notching radar and the politics of sanctions, meet in the same 48-second window. First, we'll map the raid, raiders, chaff, and an Azulan EW pod that turns sensors into noise. Then we'll widen the lens to the diplomatic quake that follows, and finally loop back to past Turkey-Russia flare-ups to show why this moment hits harder. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Why did 48 seconds of electronic silence cost Russia billions in delayed armor, ammo, and credibility? Because that silence arrived exactly where the southern rail lifeline narrows to a throat. One span over the Dawn River, one tunnel in the Caucasus range feeding Crimea, rail steel, ballast and concrete doing the work of armies every night. You cut that throat and everything behind it coughs. Fuel, shells, spare parts, even crews rotating forward. That's the target set. Not glamorous, just decisive. On paper, nothing gets near it. S-400 rings stare from deep sights. Su-30 interceptors rotate cap orbits. An AWACS watches the whole grid. Yet two drones ride the river at 120 feet, nap of the earth, hidden by curvature and banks. Their sensors lock from 28 miles, not by radar, but by heat, the thermal bloom of a bridge that never sleeps. The route keeps them below the radar horizon long enough to bait the timing and force a late intercept. Low altitude isn't bravado, it's geometry. Now for the trick that turns geometry into silence. A pulse Doppler radar sorts moving targets by how their motion shifts the frequency of the return. If your relative speed drops to zero, the radar treats you like clutter and throws you away. That's notching. You turn 90 degrees to the radar beam, cancel the closing speed, and ride the filter. For 31 seconds, the scope that mattered stopped seeing a threat, which meant no clean cue, no early shot, and no time to stack a second engagement. The drones didn't rely on notching alone. An Azulan electronic warfare pod pushed wideband noise across the X and CA frequency bands, laying static over fire control channels and range gates. Deceptive chaff streamed behind. Carbon fiber reflectors flew with it to fake bigger targets drifting at the wrong speed. The result was false range and velocity cues. Fire control computers need stable numbers before they commit a missile. The pod turned those numbers into soup. Su-30s still pushed in. R-70s went active in the merge, but the electromagnetic picture had turned into a howl. The Seekers hunted for a consistent return and kept finding ghosts, side lobes and chaff blooms that looked alive. One missile took the bait and bled out without a lock. Overhead, the A-100 crew voiced the moment in one line: "We have gone blind." When the missiles lose the thread, the clock flips to the attacker. The strike package carried MMT penetrators set with delayed fuses. They don't crater surfaces, they slip through, then detonate where structure carries load. The Dawn River Bridge had key nodes, a central pier, gusset plates tying truss members, bearings that transfer weight. Sever them, and the span doesn't sag, it snaps. The collapse drops sections into water, pulls rails like ribbon, and ruins the jigs that keep alignment. At the tunnel, a pair of delayed shots collapse the entrance throat, compacting rock and lining into a plug that takes months to cut. Here's what that silence bought. Trains stack. Dispatchers hold signals read for miles. Satellite passes showed 127 military trains stranded across the southern network. Ammo flow to Crimea fell 70% within 3 days. If a line pushes, say, 8 to 12 heavy trains daily, each carrying short tons of shells, fuel and armor, that backlog translates into an operational tempo drop. Fewer battalion pushes, fewer artillery cycles, fewer armor rotations on schedule. Name the bill. The Dawn River Bridge went into the river. A supply train crossing it carried 40 T-90M tanks. Lost rolling stock, bridge replacement, tunnel clearing, rerouting penalties, plus the cost of delayed offensives stacked to roughly $4.5 billion. One span, one tunnel, one 48-second hole in awareness, and the southern plan seized. With the bridge choking the war plan, the next fight moves from riverbanks to rooms where embassy lights burn late, and sanctions lists get longer. What does a shattered bridge do to a peace plan crafted thousands of miles away? It takes a talking point off the table and replaces it with a deadline. When steel folds and a tunnel plugs, negotiators in Ankara and Brussels stop debating theory and start counting trains, days, and leverage. Kinetic success turns into a bargaining chip the moment diplomats can point to a map and say, "Supply here is constrained for weeks." That matters more after high-level Ukrainian contacts in Turkey, quiet visits, clean agendas, and a simple ask: give political cover to keep pressure on the rail that feeds Crimea. Western capitals want de-escalation. They prefer meetings that end with phrases like restraint and corridors. Then a clean, deniable, high-precision strike lands with no civilian spillover and no messy evidence trail. Moscow faces a choice: admit weakness in a system it calls resilient, or threaten responses that risk widening the file. Either way, bargaining leverage resets. The side that can credibly repeat the effect without raising the temperature gains room to ask for tighter enforcement, longer sanction cycles, and fewer carve-outs. That's where Erdogan's tea metaphor pays off. Methodical patience, calibrated risk. Sip, wait, act. When the timing favors you, Ankara can host talks while letting a measured signal travel, not a loud strike. A precise note that says, logistics bend faster than press releases. It is a mood more than a headline, and it helps partners argue for steps that look technical on paper but bite in practice. End-use checks, slower waivers, narrower insurance for cargo that brushes sanctioned firms. We have seen Moscow push back through economics before. During the 2015 flare-up, tourism bans and trade cuts went on the table, and the deployment of S-400 missiles to Syria with a 400-kilometer range raised the risk calculus for NATO aircraft 1. The relationship had been marketed as close, yet the rhetoric turned sharp, and the cost spread across sectors 1. Those tools still exist, but the vulnerability exposed now is not a tariff line. It is rail logistics tied to a theater that runs on schedules and steel wheels. That difference reshapes sanction debates. When a supply artery is exposed in daylight, ministries stop arguing abstract deterrence and start targeting nodes. Insurance premiums for cargo near the southern corridors go up. Export controls on bearings, high-strength rail steel, signaling hardware, and diesel injector parts come to the front. Energy financing becomes leverage, not a background issue. Analysts have long argued that rail-centric doctrine is brittle under precision strikes, and this example validates the point, prompting allies to tighten export controls and energy financing 1. The political effect follows. European hawks gain ground. Proposals that urge peace now lose steam because the costs of delay now sit on Russia's side of the ledger. Kiev's long-range fires get more political cover, not just from sympathizers, but from risk managers who see a repeatable method that reduces escalation while raising the price on frontline logistics. In committees, the language shifts from broad condemnation to line-item enforcement, hull numbers, rail yards, maintenance depots, marine insurers. So what created the 48-second radar blackout that opened this window? A coordinated emissions cut by ground-based surveillance paired with deceptive returns from the Azulan pod, timed to a radar notch that starved fire control of a stable track. That silence on the scope bought the drones a final run, but it also bought diplomats a case study they could carry into rooms with fluorescent lights and stacks of draft measures. The tactical window became a diplomatic window because it showed control, deniability, and results in one short slice of time. To understand why this hit lands harder than earlier crises, step out to the longer loop where Russia-Turkey tensions and sanction cycles rise and fall, and watch how each turn leaves a mark on trade, air defense postures, and the railway maps both sides quietly update. A short, engineered silence on a radar scope echoes as a long political silence at the table. That 48-second gap didn't just hide drones, it hid options. The strike exposed how precision can shift a peace plan without firing a barrage, turning electronic warfare into diplomatic leverage. Supply lines slowed, arguments stalled, and the premise of quick compromise lost air. Next time, how do you hide a supply line when satellites never blink?